So just a quick chat about air sprung suspension. Shock pump, absolutely #1 tool you need. Digital preferred, but an analog one's fine. As long as you pay attention to exactly where the dials are. So with an analog one, you've got maybe 5mm between 150 psi and 170 psi. So you've got to look at that gauge, and you've got to make sure that you're spot on every time you set that suspension up if you want your bike to feel consistent every time. So good shock pump, #1, absolutely #1. #2 is consideration of weather. We're coming into a cooler period now, and you've probably had your bike set up for summer. If you got a new bike in summer, you would have set it up at a certain way. If it's got air suspension front and back, or air suspension just front, whatever. So let's say you've set it up to 88 psi, just random number. 25 degrees is your usual riding temperature, and 88 psi felt really, really good. Now all of a sudden you're riding in 16, 17 degrees, and it feels like your fork's a little bit slow and a little bit soft, or your bike's a little bit sluggish and not as responsive up the front. It's because that pressure because of the air temperature, or the ambient temperature, has dropped a few psi. So you check it, and when you attach this is another side note, when you attach this pump, if I take it off at 88 psi, reattach it, it'll be at 85.5 psi. It'll be 2.5 to 3 psi difference. If you're at 50 or 60, it'll probably be 2 psi difference. So when I attach the pump, so take your top cap off. Now this fork's set at 90 psi. And it's giving me 87.5 on the gauge. So 2.5 psi loss. Now that loss happens when you reattach the pump, not when you detach the pump. So now it's showing 88, so it's about 2 psi. When I detach the pump from the shock, that sound that you hear is the air from the gauge reader down that hose to here. It's the air coming out this way. So as I come out, that that you heard is the air coming from here outwards. It's not coming from in here outwards. That is sealed. That's sealed off. As you unwind this, that's sealed off. That's not going to change. So it's 88. So don't get confused and go, oh, I set it at 88, but it's probably about 85 because when I put it on, it's at 85 and blah, blah, blah. Ignore that. Whatever you leave it at, whatever you last see it at, is what it's set at. Which brings me to my next point. We'll attach the pump. And say, I'm lending the bike to a heavier rider, or my fork lost a heap of pressure because I was trying to do a trail side, release a bit of pressure and I released too much. Right, so I've got to add another 10 psi. Pump, 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 pump. Now you get to wherever you want to be, even if you're pumping it up from flat after a service. If you're pumping up from flat, you want to go 20, 30, maybe 40 psi, and then neutralize it or equalize it by putting the fork through its travel. Now you don't need to go jump on the fork and carry on like that. There's no need for that. There's literally the equalization port is just below that point of where the fork sits naturally. So in the Fox fork, it's just there. It's just below, like you don't have to push down far at all to find that equalization. And you're not going down and up, down and up, down and up to find the equalization. All you have to do is get to that point, let it equalize, and then do a few slow passes. So you say that's the hole, that's your equalization hole, and you've got, say on that knuckle of my finger, you've got a port. You've got a little port on the side of the stanchion, and you want to go just to that port. So it lets the air in between the positive and the negative chambers to equalize. And then you want to do a little bit of up and down, but you're not going crazy. You're just doing just to share air between the two chambers. And then take the weight off, let it sit under its own weight, check it, and that way it's always consistent. So we're at 88.5, so I'm going to go another couple of pumps. Now it's gone to 90.5. So take it off a little bit, now it's reading 90.0. Now before I go, yep, cool, that's 90.0, that's cool, I can take that off, I'm going to equalize again. So just letting it equalize, take the weight off, let it sit under its own weight, consistent. If I don't take the weight off and it might only be a PSI or half a PSI, but it's the difference between your bike feeling exactly how you want it and almost exactly how you want it. And that might be the difference between crashing, hitting a fence post, doing your shoulder, doing your ribs, whatever. I'm not saying that that's what created my crash, obviously, but you just never know what can go wrong if your bike's not feeling how you're used to riding it. So we're at 90.5. So I have to take a little bit out, 90, check it, 90, perfect. Now when I take that off, that's going to feel exactly how I like the fork to feel. And another consideration is when you service it, or get someone to service it, you don't know how much grease they've put in the negative side and how much grease they've put on top of the piston on the positive side. So that can play a little bit of a difference between how much pressure feels exactly how it used to feel at. So it used to feel really good at 90, and now because there's more grease in the positive side, it might have that same feeling at 86 psi or 87 psi. So that's another consideration. So these are only very, very minor details, but if you're real finicky like I am, these are potential reasons why your fork may or may not be feeling correct or feeling consistent. So a little bit of a rundown on how to equalize your fork and add pressure correctly in order to have a consistent fork. So I'll put the top cap back on. Don't be confused about that, taking the pressure off, and my opinion of these, there's certain pumps that come with a zero release dial here, where you gotta undo two different things and do two different things. It's too confusing. It's too much to think about. You just want simple and effective. And to me, RockShox or a Fox pump, anything like that with just a simple on and off is perfect. Now it's the same process for your shock. You pump it up incrementally. If you're going from flat, you pump it up incrementally, and you go, say you go down to 170, you go to 50, equalize it, and again, when you're equalizing, you're not jumping up and down on the bike. You're just going down to find it, and at first you'll have a fair bit of resistance, and that first effort you'll hear it, and it'll feel like the resistance drops a little bit. So now you got to go back through the stroke and find that spot again, and you'll find it. If you're paying attention, you will find that spot, and it'll go shh, shh, and then eventually it'll stop making noise and it'll stop feeling like there's interruption there, interference there, and then it'll feel smoother, and you'll know that it's equalized. You go up to 100 and you equalize it again. The reason why we equalize it during the process is because if you go to 150 before you equalize it, it is so hard to put force in there to get it to equalize. So equalizing up through throughout the process of pumping it up just makes it a lot easier when you get to that final stage. Equalize it, and again, when you're doing your fine tuning, where you're at 170 and you equalize, and then it drops to 165, then you go, you're aiming for 175, you get it to 175, you equalize, take the pressure off, let it sit. You don't want to hang, you're not hanging, you just want to let the pressure, you take the pressure off so there's no residual force pressure. If your rebound's running slow or whatever, it's not going to rebound up correctly, so it's going to read higher than what your pressure actually is. So just taking the pressure off like that before you check it, and you don't need to take the pump off every time you equalize. I've seen a lot of people do that as well. It would be a good idea to take the pump off if you're going to be equalizing like this, because you're probably going to do some damage to the pump, because it's going to ramp up from 170 to 250 or 280 through that gauge, and you don't want the gauge taking that sort of force. It's a pretty intricate little tool. So when you're equalizing, be gentle, find that equalization point, pay attention to it. Don't just blindly go, yep, if I do 10 pumps that'll be equalized, because that's how it's described on a few different videos. You're not just pumping 10 times, you want to find that equalization point, and you will find it. It's easy to find when you're looking for it. So pay attention. You don't have to take the pump off while you're equalizing, and you're not losing pressure out of the shock when you remove the pump. And if you are, it's always consistent. As long as you're always unwinding it at the same pace and whatever, it's always going to be consistent. So you don't have to worry about guessing how much PSI is, oh, you know, I pump it up to 185, but it's probably more like 180 because it loses pressure, ignore that. If it's 185, it's 185. When you take the pump off, it's that pressure out of that line. So I hope that clears things up a little bit. I might do a video on my thoughts on air suspension versus coil suspension as well. I haven't spent a lot of time on coils recently, a little bit but not a lot, but I do have a fair understanding of it, and yeah, maybe shed a little bit of light on it for you guys. For now, get out, ride your bike, and pump your shocks up consistently and correctly. And if you don't have a good shock pump, this is about 110 bucks, 100 bucks. If you like the feel of air suspension, which I do for the most part, get yourself a good pump for sure. It's a good investment, and it'll keep your bike feeling consistent, and it'll keep your rides safer. That's it.